Rosh Hashanah begins this evening at sunset, and as I said earlier, perhaps the most memorable element of the holiday is indeed that sound of the shofar, the ram's horn. Throughout the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, observant Jews will hear 100 blasts of the horn, but each blast is not the same. So for kids, this is the answer, in case they remember to ask you the question. One is called teruah. It is 9 quick blasts on the horn. It sounds as if there is an alarm calling out to us. Wake up! Wake up! The book of life is now open. Reflect upon your thoughts and deeds and experiences and ask yourself, the Torah, the Hebrew Bible, and the teachings associated with it are ultimately a meditation about choosing life, choosing our humanity, choosing peace, and choosing love. How have I chosen these things in the past year, and when have I fallen short? According to the custom, the Book of Life opens every year on Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the Jewish New Year, and it remains open for 10 days, known as the Days of Awe. It is a holy and fertile time. It is a time when our lives seem to hang in the balance. Not so much because Jewish people or Unitarian Universalists would believe that our lives will literally end in the next 10 days. But because it just might be possible, and maybe this is even more frightening, that we are already leading lives that could be equated with death. As Socrates once wrote, the unexamined life is not worth living. The sound of the shofar breaks through our psychological and spiritual armor and pierces the heart. Hopefully, even the hearts in this room or in rooms around the world that have turned to stone and indeed sounds an alarm. Do not sleep through this day or any other. Do not wait to remember what your soft, unbruised heart longed for as a child. Give and receive life more abundantly this year. Give and receive all of your humanity. Why not become a standard bearer of peace, a standard bearer of love? A second note the shofar sounds is called shivarim, and this time we hear those 3 short broken notes. These notes remind us of our sharing in the brokenness of this world. These notes remind us of our imperfection, of the ways that we have failed or faltered in our thinking or in our actions, the ways that we have missed opportunities to bring about healing, justice, and right relations with ourselves, with our friends, and with the source of life itself. And the final note the shofar sounds is called tekiah. This time we hear one long, piercing note that lasts 9 beats. Awakened by that alarm, moving to that place of acceptance that we are flawed and participate in brokenness, we can then move forward into a new day and a new year, ready for the task of creating and sharing in more abundant life. This long, unbroken note reminds us that we are indeed still alive and have within our own hearts everything we need to participate in the healing of situations of our individual lives and our world if we allow ourselves to be led by love. The story I just shared about that rabbi who holds up a kind of model of perfection, no doubt he has his foibles in his own way. But these kinds of guides in our lives remind us that indeed we could lead lives that participate in healing most of the time. Perhaps one day people would be whispering that we were somewhere better if we were not in the room where we were supposed to be. Wholeness and holiness are as close to us and as much a part of us as our own breath. And so, when we hear that note, when we listen to the stories of people striving towards love, we say to one another the following wish: may you be inscribed in the book of life for a good year. This annual spiritual checkup is good for the soul, and not only for Jewish people, but for all of us. I am grateful that I was raised in a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we held Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services on the first evening of each holiday. It has provided me, amongst other opportunities, a chance to reflect on what I am allowing to lead my life, to take stock and to renew my commitments and my covenants. Given that I am human and flawed like every other human being, I do make mistakes. And I will miss the mark of our cherished ideals like those held up in our 7 principles. And if you're here for the first time, the 7 principles are right before the first hymn in that gray hymn book. In a very real sense, if the covenants that we make with one another, whether in our marriages, in our friendships, in our classrooms, in our congregations with our whole Unitarian Universalist Association, matter, if they are strong enough, they won't just be a set of rules for how to conduct ourselves. They certainly won't be a list of don'ts like the 10 Commandments, but rather they will be a set of promises that we might call aspirations, hopes and desires that lead us ever more towards justice, towards love, towards one another, towards the holy. They are the kinds of promises that allow us to really feel like we are participating in Tikkun Olam, the healing of the world. Our aspirations, though, are like the notes of the shofar, carrying people's prayers and longings up to God or deep into the spark of the divine in our hearts. Blowing the shofar takes practice. It is the practice of breath. It is the practice of focus. It is a practice of the heart. And in the story we heard earlier, I am certain that each of the men thought that their response to the rabbi in the first story about what they would be meditating upon was best. But sometimes we miss the mark. Maybe they thought they were meditating on the holy, but it became clear to the rabbi in their telling that they wanted to blow the shofar for themselves more than for others, as they had claimed. Perhaps in that moment, simple honesty felt more healing than meditating on holiness. The holiday of Rosh Hashanah includes each of us meditating on our brokenness or our, and I warn you, scary word, sin. But in Hebrew, sin is really translated as missing the mark. We might think that about the arrows of our aspirations and our covenants. We might think of them as more likely to hit the target with practice. In Judaism, there is not the state of sinfulness as a permanent condition that affects one generation to the next, but rather a sense that a part of being human is learning how to come closer and closer to hitting the targets in our lives that matter most. And this is indeed one of the aims of our religious exploration program. And I think it's really important. And I'll say this, I am not the rabbi who, probably when I'm not in the room, people think I'm in heaven. But I am the minister who has received a great gift from all of you and from others, especially on the eve of their marriages and when the marriages get rocky. I have been able to witness to so many people attempting to listen to one another, to hear, and to move towards forgiveness in some very difficult situations. Sometimes those episodes lead to healing by staying together, and sometimes with great sadness, it turns out that healing means the dissolution of that relationship. You have given me this gift of the honesty, that's what that person possessed in the beginning, the honesty about real life and how it can be difficult to wrestle with the ways we have fallen short. And so actually when David and I got married, immediately following the sharing of our covenant, the vows, we included a ritual which we called first gifts, which assumed that we would fall short occasionally of those aspirations and that we needed to find a way to come back to each other. And so what we did was we had a vase in the wedding ceremony, and each of us gave the other a flower, and we promised that when there was a trouble brewing in our hearts or in the marriage or something that we had done or something we felt had been done against us, we promised that we would place a flower there to covenant that we would come to our partner and talk about it in a timely fashion. And some people might think, how strange to make a covenant and the very next moment, assume you're going to break it. But that's exactly what covenants are about. They're not so easy. Some of the rules we talked about last week are somewhat simple, like the children might suggest no hitting each other, or as I said, when you're working on the 5th floor, if you're in New York, no throwing each other out the window. But to be honest, hopefully we learn those things pretty soon in life, and they become easy not to hit other people and not to throw them out the window. But most of the covenants that we make, the ones that really bring us to a place of aspiration and meaning and making a difference and participating in healing, are not so simple. What does it mean to be honest at all times? What does it mean when you don't want to hurt someone like a friend? What does it mean to value respect, and how might that translate, and how might it get confusing? So this time of year is a wonderful spiritual checkup when each of us can indeed count our blessing, count the ways that we are fulfilling our covenants with one another, with ourselves, and with the world. And also take stock of where we have missed the mark. 10 days we are invited to turn within, to examine our deeds, and then to make amends. And a very powerful aspect of this holiday is that it really is a self-guided journey. In some religious traditions, if I have wronged someone, I turn to God to ask for forgiveness. But the practice of this holiday, the practice of turning inward here, is about going back to that person. It is not for God to forgive me when I have transgressed in a relationship with another. And so, throughout the 10 days, we think, how have I missed the mark with myself? How have I missed the mark with my partner, with a friend, with my congregation, with our earth, with the source of life itself, and then go on a journey of turning my life around And then on the 10th day, coming back with a new sense of what freedom would look like in my life, of what being free and forgiven and offering that same thing to others would look like. Now, an important thing to mention about this holiday is that thank goodness it happens every year, because I know that I would be daunted, frankly, to face the mountain of 38 years. 38 years would seem way too much to deal with in 10 days. And so, built in is this annual counting. It originates from the counting of the harvest. And now it is the counting of the blessings and the counting of how we have fallen short of our covenants each year. It is a powerful, can be a very powerful journey. And so I invite you to think about these words in a whole new way. To think about sin as more about missing the targets that you long for, that you would set for yourselves, and having the courage to turn inwards, and then the hope, and then the powerful hope that you can change. That you can change. And the most powerful story I can think of, connected to that, which I will share very briefly, is that we have come to know the story of Alfred Nobel as a great peacemaker in the world. But at first, he discovered that his legacy, printed in the newspaper, he was characterized as a merchant of death. He had spent his life's work and his scientific abilities on creating quick ways to kill a large number of people. Before Alfred, weapons of war were things like guns and bayonets, and combat was a matter of one-on-one. But he became the inventor of such a destructive force, dynamite, that many would be killed at once. He was shocked to learn that his legacy would be viewed as a killer of so many. And he resolved that day, then and there, to change his course. He decided that he would use his amassed wealth to promote advances in physics and chemistry, physiology and medicine, literature and peace. And so he devoted all of his energy and his worth, his net worth, to that endeavor. And indeed, today, he is remembered for that, for a peaceful man rather than for being a destructive man. So while the image of a rabbi being in heaven might seem far from me or from some of you today, maybe we too could be known as a man or a woman closer to love, closer to peace, closer to God. May that be the sweetness that this new year brings us all.